I'm Julie Bullitt. I've been a family therapist for over 30 years.
I'm David Bullitt. I've been a divorce and family lawyer for more than 35 years.
Together, we have been married for more than 37 years.
In our professional practices, the two of us have been witnesses to individuals and families struggling with life's most difficult challenges. In this podcast, we will talk about the conversations we have had,
The conversations we should have had.
and those that every relationship needs to have in order to find success, happiness, and fulfillment.
This is Conversations for Couples.
The podcast. Welcome to today's version of Conversations for Couples. We are tremendously excited to have our friends and two awesome parents. And this is a special one because we're gonna run this on Father's Day. And we have two amazing fathers with us here. They're friends of ours. They have been married for 19 years. They are the founders of the international nonprofit Comfort Cases, which is just an awesome place and an awesome place to put your money and put your time. We're going to put a link in the bio to this episode. They have 5 children. They got their children through the foster system. They're a multiracial family. They have Rob working, Reece working, people running and kids running everywhere. And we're really looking forward to talking to you both today. Welcome, Rob and Reece Shear.
Well, thank you, my friends. Thank you so much for having us again. This is so exciting. I say this all the time. There's nothing better than to be on a podcast when you're on a podcast with friends, because to me, it's just an easy conversation.
I've really been looking forward to it because we've been on your show a couple of times, and we've had times where we've just talked at various drinking establishments as well. And what I really want to talk about today, because I think it fits in with your relationship and also fits in with what we do. And that is your family, how you built your family and where you are today, how you got here, the pressures, the difficulties that getting those children, that getting them into your family, that raising your family and getting you to where you are today, 19 years later, started. And so that's kind of what I'd like to focus on. But I think, although a lot of people know the both of you, if it would take a couple of quick minutes, and Reece, we'll start with you, a little background in terms of, where you grew up, where you came from, how you met Rob, and so forth.
Well, I came from Kansas, so I'm a Midwest boy. I moved to the DC area in 2002, just after 9/11 had happened. Really, it was a venture for me to, because I was born and raised in Kansas City area, wanted to see if I could make it somewhere else. So that really kind of brought me to the area. I had a best friend that was from Anacostia. So that kind of made me familiar with DC to come to the area. And then it was probably about 3 years after I had moved to DC area that I ran into this one at the bar. I was out with a friend and ran into, saw him from across the room. Let's put it that way.
Was it love at first sight?
I think it was definitely fascination.
It may still be fascination knowing Rob.
No, he might have a different story on that, but definitely I was a wallflower. So he had to approach me because that's just kind of how I am when it comes to those social events. And
so
I want
tell
to
us a little bit.
The person's interested before I act to anything.
And Rob, tell us a little bit about where you came from and how you got here. And
I actually grew up here in the DMV, and the crazy part is I actually grew up totally different than my husband. My husband's parents, before my father-in-law passed away, they'd been married for like 54 years. My husband, very well educated, has his master's, really probably never heard of the word foster care mentioned very much within his lifespan compared to where it was a daily word in my life because I grew up in it and it was a part of me. And so, and yes, it is true that we did meet at a bar. And for me, I remember the person that I was sitting with having a drink. When I saw Reece walk in, I looked at him and I had been single for a couple of years and I said, that's going to be my husband. And my friend said, why don't you have another drink? And I said, no, I'm serious. And so as I kept staring at him, trying to come on, is he going to walk over? Is he going to say hi to me? His friend walked over and said, listen, I can see that you're really into my friend. And so I will tell you right now, he is very shy. He will never come over and speak to you. He was like, but if you walk over and speak to him, I know he will talk to you. And so that's what happened
Wow.
19 years ago.
Wow. Well, so can I just ask a story, a little question about this? Were you at a gay bar? Like, how did you know that he was
We
even
were,
gay?
we were at a gay bar
Okay.
in
I was
DC.
gonna say because if you were like just assuming that he was a good fit for you.
Yeah,
So.
no, we were at a gay bar. Back then they didn't have apps. So it was,
Yeah.
The good old fashioned way when you actually had to talk to somebody and see him in person. Yes, the noise you hear in the background is Frank digging through a bucket through a toy. Those who listen to the show know that Frank makes his own special appearances.
Frank is our golden retriever.
That's our golden
we
retriever.
love Frank. We love Frank.
He's quite the interesting character.
Yeah, he's gonna have his own podcast.
We'll probably
one
bring
day.
him on. He doesn't talk a lot, but he's very expressive. So talk a little bit about at what point after you meet, how long does it take you get together and get married?
So we actually, I asked Reece out that night. I asked him out for a date the very next day. And I asked if he wanted to go to dinner. And so we went to dinner the very next night that I met him. And I remember the very first part of our conversation was I asked him straight out, do you want to be a dad? And I remember seeing his face thinking, okay, why would somebody on our very first date ask me? And he was like, well, he's like, I'm in the process of getting my master's. And he's like, and if I ever find the right person, he's like, I would love to be a dad. And I said, okay. I was like, we could go out on a second date if this one goes well.
Wow. So that was important to you. And I know we interviewed you for our book, and that was a really big component is like, Rob, you always knew you wanted to be a dad.
Yeah. It's, I actually posted just yesterday, one of the greatest joys of my life, and I've been very blessed and lucky. I've had amazing careers. I have an amazing husband who supports me. But the best thing in my life is the fact that I'm a dad. That is to me the greatest thing is that I'm a dad.
That's cool.
And Reece, did you need some convincing to be a parent, or was it something that was important to you as well?
No, it was probably more of a situation that I figured kids would be in the process of my life at some point. Now, I had not really gone through the process of thinking how that was going to come about. I really kind of thought I would meet somebody that already had kids in their life somehow, and I would just kind of join in. But, or if we were to do the process, I figure, adoption. Definitely.
Did you guys ever consider like doing a surrogacy situation?
So you have to realize, 19 years ago when Reece and I first got together, and by the way, we dated for, we were not your typical gay couple. So sorry, all my gay friends who are going to listen to this. I get these emails from them in the text message saying, how can you say that about us? The typical gay couple, they meet and within 2 weeks, the U-Haul pulls up in front of their house and they move in together. And so Reece and I were totally different. We actually dated for 2 years in 2 separate homes before we actually moved in together. So we had a lot of time to get to know each other, a lot of time to really talk about, our journey and our path before we made that decision of moving in together. And then after we moved in together, we then, we lived together for another 2 years to, once again, really, form our relationship before, the kid part came in. But we didn't know anybody that had ever done surrogacy. We didn't know we knew no gay couples that had kids. We walked into it completely blind. And for me, I thought we were going to adopt overseas.
Mm.
And it was Reese who actually was the one, because understanding now we're 4 years into the relationship, Reese completely knows about my past. He knows about me growing up in foster care. He knows about my siblings. He knows about every bit of trauma that I had gone through. He experienced some of it.
Mm.
You know, so for him immediately was, oh, we're going to adopt out of foster care. And for me, it was, oh, we're going to adopt overseas. But Sarah was
Mm.
saying something, I mean, I look back now and I think, gosh, I wish I would have known that option was there.
Mhm.
Not that I would change the fact of, having our 5 beautiful kids. But, we just didn't know.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit about and practicing law and doing some juvenile work and working with kids who are in foster care and in the juvenile system and so forth. I know the difficulties that prospective parents can go through when it comes to qualifying to be a foster parent and then going through the adoption process from foster to adoption, and particularly with you and we're in 2024, and as hard as it may sound to some folks, 2005, 2006, 2007 were very, very different, and in a lot of ways. So tell us a little bit about the pressures and, if any, the struggles that the two of you had as you were going through the process of fostering and adopting your children.
Well, I want everybody to understand something, that when we were fostering to adopt our children and the struggles that we had, I thought that those struggles were because, as you just said, that was so many years ago. Our children arrived actually 15 years ago. So when we just recently went through the adoption of our older son, when he arrived in 2019, we went through those same struggles again.
Really? So
So,
what were those
Talk
struggles?
to us a
those
little bit about
struggles
that.
of the racism of the fact that we were two gay men,
Hmm.
and trying to adopt a child out of foster care, and
Mm.
I was shocked.
Mm.
I thought those years were so behind us,
Wow.
and so to go back to our first 4 children. We have 2 sets of siblings. They are 4 kids of color. They arrived at a very young age. And, when we realized that the court system basically wasn't doing anything for them, that their birth parents were not being involved within their lives, my husband and I immediately went to the social workers and says, that this goal needs to be, adoption. And they did change the goal to adoption/reunification. So as soon
Hmm.
as that happened,
Mm.
we thought that the social workers and child welfare would immediately jump behind us and be like, okay, let's start the adoption process. But instead they didn't.
Wow.
Instead they said, you're not ready. And you also have to go back and think about when our first children first arrived. When we first got our license, we kept calling and asking, why hasn't anybody called us for a kid? I mean, there were all
Mhm.
these kids coming into the
Mhm.
system in the District of Columbia. And we found out 6 months after we had been approved for our license, after a particular employee had retired, that she had taken our application and put it at the bottom of the stack because she didn't
Oh.
believe that 2 white men should have anything to do with children, and especially children of color.
Oh,
So,
wow.
to have that in our face,
Yes.
was an absolute shock. And then to have
Yeah.
child welfare not support us for the adoption, my husband and I sat down one night, and I'll never forget it. I said, listen, we're very blessed. We financially, we were very, very stable. And I said, let's do what we need to do, and let's hire our own attorney. And I
Mhm.
remember the social worker sitting down with Reese and I and saying, you're going to lose your kids.
Oh.
Judge is going to rule on the
Oh.
birth parents, and even though the birth parents are going to get them back, these kids will go to another foster home, and you're going to lose these kids. And so to have that hanging over us for how
Mhm.
many years for the adoption? When it took us 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years for that to hang over our head. But we just felt like that was what needed to be done. And again, mind you, when you adopt out of foster care, there isn't a cost. But for my husband and I, it cost us over $65,000 to
Wow.
adopt our children.
Wow.
Sorry, Jules. Also, I want to know during this time when you're waiting and you're facing, these rejections and the prospect of the ultimate rejection, not getting your children. What's going on between the two of you? Is this a pull apart time? Is this a lean in? We're gonna tough it out, or is it some of both?
I would say it was definitely a lean in,
Yeah.
definitely to strengthen between us
Hmm.
to be able to fight it. So,
I will have
Yeah.
to tell you, the one thing that I've learned through this journey in the last 19 years, and especially the last 15 years that we've had kids, and I want people to understand that, no matter whether you adopt a child out of foster care, you adopt a child from overseas, or you actually do a surrogacy, or you have your own biological children, you are never, never guaranteed how that child is going to end up. You're never guaranteed
Sure.
whether or not that child is going to have ADHD, whether that child is going to be, whether or not they're going to, have autism.
Hmm.
There's no crystal ball.
Right.
So the thing that I've learned in the last 15 years of having our children, and people see us as public figures and they see this beautiful family, and I want people to understand that we have our issues as well.
Hmm.
We have kids who, suffer from reactive attachment disorder. We have kids who have fetal alcohol syndrome. We have kids who suffer from severe depression.
Yeah.
So we have the gambit of what our children go through the trauma because of them being in the system. But what I've learned is that it has made my marriage and
Hmm.
my partnership stronger with my husband. And I'm not saying that it's
Yeah.
always easy for us. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that, oh my gosh, it's always roses and he likes me and I like him, because that is not the truth. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, we both know that we're there for each other, and we never allow our kids to pin us against each other.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, and as you're talking, Rob, I mean, I work with, as a therapist, I work with a lot of adopted children and adults, and there are extra layers of mental health and behavioral and addiction issues that show up at a higher rate than, in the general public. So I think you're right that you do need to know that that's a bigger risk when you're adopting. And David and I adopted two of our four daughters, and we've had our own, situations with one of our daughters. And I do think in some ways that's been the hardest time in our lives as a couple is, dealing with the behaviors, dealing with the addictions, dealing with the running away. However, when I look back and if someone were to ask me, would you want to change it? Well, yes and no, because I think as a human being, as a partner, as a therapist, it's made me stronger that that we have gone through this together. We ultimately, stay on the same page. And it's not something that you would wish for, but it certainly is something that, brings you together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're talking a little bit, Rob, about the whole nature versus nurture, and it isn't really a one or the other. I mean, in our situation, as Julie mentioned, two of our girls are adopted. One who just turned 30, got her master's degree as a teacher, and one of the most wonderful kids you're ever going to meet. Just bright, smart, articulate. And the other went a completely different direction, who we haven't seen now in 10 or so years, and yet they're born to the same biological parents, they're raised in the same home, and go completely different directions. And I think in some degree, for us, those were the most difficult times because we were not on the same page. We've talked about this before when it came to treating, trying to figure out what to do, how to handle, and so forth. And so, I got to think that there were times with the two of you, especially as your kids got older, right? And now they're more into their teen years and so forth. It's no longer the world is just our house, right? And getting on the bus, going to school. But now all of a sudden the world becomes bigger, the problems become bigger. And it seems to me that the pressures on parents, like the two of you, also start to build in that period of time. And how you handled, I got to assume there were some differences of opinion and how you handled those differences, I think would be interesting for our folks to hear.
Right, because you have your two different backgrounds. I mean, Reece, you sort of talked about your, white picket fence family, and Rob, you grew up in the foster care system. So how did those differences show up?
Right.
How did they show up?
Yeah, I will tell you that I mean, I've seen the differences even just recently of some of the things that we're going through with some of our kids right now, where I tend to give them a little bit more grace. Where I know where they're coming from. I've been there. I know where my husband, he is definitely the nurturer of the relationship. But when it comes to, choices that our children are making, he doesn't understand it, and he's more like, okay, we're not dealing with this, and I'm more of like, I react, and then
Mm-hmm.
I come back and I realize, okay, they didn't do this on purpose. This is,
Mm-hmm.
this is all the chemical makeup that's going on within
Mm,
their brain, and so we've seen that, and just recently, by the way, having to deal with one of our kids, who made some really bad choices, and it's like, okay, it, I don't know. It's, for me as a young boy, the only thing I ever wanted to feel in my life is unconditional love. For someone to love me, no matter whether I broke that favorite plate of yours, or maybe I stayed out later in curfew than I should have, and I never felt that, and I never had that. And
mm,
so when it comes to our kids, it is just something, that I truly make sure that it's in my forefront, that to always remember that I promised them,
mm,
that no matter what they did. And by the way, I mean, we're very open about the fact. I mean, we have one son who we haven't seen in a while, and I don't know when we'll see him, and
mm.
because of the choices that he's made, and but when I do talk to him on the phone, I always say to him, and I always remind him that no matter what you did, I love you, and I am gonna always stand next to you. So I think that
Yeah.
that's something,
Mhm.
not that you don't love them, and that you don't love them unconditionally. It's your reaction compared to how my reaction is.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
and Reece, tell me if this is true, because I had this with Julie, when our kids were younger. It was less the case as our kids got older, and I tend to be at home more often. But when you're home managing your family day to day and managing kids day to day, as opposed to like I was, and I think Rob, you too, to some degree, were out and about doing the job that you have to do to help support the family. Julie and I make a joke. I would go for a haircut and she'd get pissed, right? What do you mean you want to go for a haircut? Because she didn't have that time. And so the perspective on an issue with your child is naturally, I think, going to be different between two folks who have different responsibilities. So when Rob's saying, "Well, I want you to know how much I love you," Reece probably wants to go. I'm assuming wants to go clang a pot somewhere, somewhere, right? I mean, isn't that right?
No, it's true. It's definitely
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Um, I think really in that is you're just coming from two different places.
Right.
Yeah.
For myself, like he talked about unconditional love. Well, okay, yes, I grew up with unconditional love. So therefore, that's a baseline. Let's move past that.
Hmm.
Right.
Where I'm already at the next step where I think maybe he's still working at the unconditional love
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of it.
Right. And that's a trigger for him when that doesn't feel like it's there or it's
Correct.
tested. So I wanted to just kind of, we're getting ready to wrap up, and I wanted to just dig into the two of you and what you guys do. And I know you knew this question was coming because we always go there. What is it? What have
I
you
listen to
done?
your podcast, so I
Okay,
know
good.
exactly what
What is it for the people that are listening? What is it that you guys have done? You've had a very, interesting background, and what is it that you've done to stay a couple? to keep that open.
Wow. Do you want to answer that first?
I'm trying.
Okay, I will.
Really?
So this is the crazy. So as you know, I mean, being public figures, it's very hard. It's because everybody is looking at us and thinking, the thing that I will say that has really allowed us to last 19 years, and I see another 19 years with my husband. I don't see that, um, is the fact that when I do come home, and by the way, David, you are right. I am gone all the time. I mean, last year I spent 189 nights in hotels traveling
Yeah.
as a public speaker. And so my husband, he truly does everything. And I mean, literally everything. And what I love when I come home from a trip, no matter what, no matter whether we had a disagreement on the phone while I was away, we always don't talk about what happened yesterday. We talk about what happened today. And so that is something that we have always done in our relationship is, and we're both, I mean, not perfect. And I have made mistakes and I have, but the thing that my husband has always done is he's always given me grace. And he's always, realized that, the love that I have for him, just looking at him across the room, and he and I will catch each other's eye. He knows when I look at him that I absolutely worship him, that he is the kindest. When I say be a good human, and I've used that term since we started our organization 11 years ago, that definition, when I say a good human, that definition in my mind is Reece. And because that is what I see all the time. Our children are first. I am first. Our animals are first. Everybody is first. And, and I just, like I said, I am probably the luckiest man in the world because I did meet someone that when you truly say, oh, that's a soulmate, it truly is that. I read something the other day. When you tell somebody that you love them from the moon and back, you really should think about the fact of how far the moon truly is and how much oxygen it takes and how much of your heart does that take if you were to go to the moon. Well, that's infinity. And so to me, I truly love my husband to the moon and back. And I couldn't imagine this journey without him. And I can't imagine, we have our youngest son. He's 15. He's a freshman in high school. We have 4 more years until he's out of the house. And the thing that I love the most is that I know for a fact that when our son leaves for college, Reese and I are not going to be sitting on the couch and trying to figure out what to say to each other. And the reason for that is because we've already started having the conversations. We already talk. And so it's nice to have that.
Yeah. So you're talking about what I'm hearing. If I can just highlight some of the things I asked you the question, what keeps you connected? It sounds like unconditional love, respect, kindness. Those are the things that kind of came out from what you said. And I'd love to hear, Reece, what do you think it is? What keeps you together?
Well, I think number one is unconditional love, just because he comes from a different place than I do. I have to myself constantly reevaluate that in our situation. So definitely that. Being kind is just, it's a human aspect that we all need, is to be kind to each other. And definitely we love each other. And in that, it doesn't necessarily mean you like each other at that time, but you love each other enough to work through it.
I have one question along the same lines, because you talked a little bit about this during in the interview with our last book, Secrets of Strong Couples, and that's the faith component that the two of you sort of found together. Tell us a little bit about how that works into your relationship as husbands, as parents, and in terms of your family.
Yeah, our faith. My husband and I have a very deep faith. And the thing that we seem to really understand is that we do believe there's a higher power. I will have to say, though, since your last book, and, dealing with teenagers who are starting to ask more questions, it truly has made Reese and I really look at our faith as well. And what I say about that, it doesn't mean that, and by the way, my mother-in-law will be listening to this. Mom, we still believe, and, but what it's given us a pathway to is that faith is just not about, Jesus and God and a Bible, but faith is truly about, believing that you're there for each other. And I say this, and people have said stuff to me, Jesus was an amazing man. He loved his community more than anybody could ever imagine. But so did Nelson Mandela. So did Mother Teresa. So did Gandhi. And for us, that's the kind of faith that we strive for, is to be that type of person, who truly impacts their community of the love, and to just know, do I hope I go somewhere else when I leave here? You better believe it, but you know what? At the end of the day, I'm here. And so I need my faith to be drawn through here, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It does. And let me just say to the two of you, as we close things down today, no one could argue with the fact that you've impacted your community and how you've helped children and families. I dare anybody to stand up and say that the two of you haven't impacted your community, and you certainly have impacted us. We've been really blessed to become your friends, both with headphones on and without, by the way. So thank you guys both for coming on.
You guys are awesome.
You can find us at The Bullets, TheBullits, our website, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, all that other stuff. I don't even know half of them what they are. And
we will also link comfort cases and to find out more about the organization that helps kids get rid of trash bags and get backpacks and suitcases and live with dignity.
Go to that site, learn about comfort cases, read Rob and Reese's book, and learn about what they do and pitch in and help. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is Conversations for Couples,
the podcast.
Take care, my friends. Thank you.
Julie Bullitt is a professionally licensed clinical social worker and family therapist. David Bullitt is a divorce and family lawyer. Julie is not your therapist, and David is not your lawyer. This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only.